Hey everyone! Tonight we're diving into one of history's most dramatic transformations. The story of how a single Chinese state conquered an entire continent, unified warring kingdoms, and created the blueprint for Imperial China that would last over 2,000 years. This is the tale of the Qin Dynasty, brutal, brilliant, and breathtakingly ambitious. So before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you enjoy these deep dives into history. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always fascinating to see our global community come together to explore the past. Now dim the lights, maybe brew some tea, and let's journey back to ancient China, where one man's vision would reshape the world's most populous civilization forever. Picture this. You wake up in ancient China, around 300 BCE. But there is no China as we know it today. Instead, you find yourself in a world where 7 major kingdoms are locked in endless, brutal warfare. The air smells of smoke from distant battles, and the horizon is dotted with fortified cities, each flying different banners, each claiming legitimacy. You're living through what historians call the Warring States period, and it's exactly as chaotic as it sounds. For over 250 years, these kingdoms have been tearing each other apart. Wei, Zhao Han, Chu, Qi, Yan, and in the far west, a state that many consider barbaric and backward Qin. Your village sits near a border that shifts with every military campaign. One day you're paying taxes to the kingdom of Wei, the next month you're under Zhao control, and by winter, well, if you're lucky enough to survive the crossfire, you might find yourself bowing to yet another set of rulers. This isn't just political instability. This is civilizational chaos. Imagine living in medieval Europe if every duchy, every principality, every minor lord was constantly at war, but multiply that by the scale of an entire continent. That's what ancient China had become. The roads, when they exist, are dangerous. Bandits prey on merchants, armies requisition everything they can find, and refugees flood from one devastated region to another. There's no unified currency. What passes for money in Qi might be worthless in Chu. There's no standard system of weights and measures. Even the written language varies from state to state. But here's what makes this period fascinating. Despite all the warfare, or perhaps because of it, this is also an era of incredible innovation. New military technologies are being developed. Iron weapons are replacing bronze. Crossbows are revolutionizing warfare. And most importantly, new ideas about governance, philosophy, and society are emerging. Confucius had taught about moral leadership and social harmony. Laozi spoke of the natural way. And in the academies and courts, a new school of thought was gaining traction, legalism. The idea that human nature was fundamentally selfish, that only strict laws and harsh punishments could create order from chaos. It's into this fractured world that our story's protagonist emerges. Not in the sophisticated Eastern kingdoms with their ancient traditions and refined culture, but in the western frontier state of Qin, a place that the other kingdoms looked down upon as crude and militaristic. They had no idea what was coming. If you were a diplomat from one of the Eastern kingdoms visiting Qin in 300 BCE, you'd probably be horrified. Where's the poetry? Where are the elaborate court rituals? Why does everyone seem so practical? Qin was different, and that difference would prove to be its greatest strength. While the Eastern kingdoms had grown sophisticated and, some might argue, soft, Qin remained hard. It was a frontier state, constantly fighting not just other Chinese kingdoms, but nomadic tribes from the steppes beyond. Geographically, Qin occupied what is now Western China, a region of mountains, valleys, and harsh winters. The land itself bred tough people. Qin farmers were also soldiers. Qin soldiers were also farmers. Everyone understood that survival depended on discipline, hard work, and absolute loyalty to the state. But Qin's transformation from frontier kingdom to imperial powerhouse didn't happen by accident. It began with a series of radical reforms implemented by a foreign advisor named Xiangyang around 356 BCE. Xiangyang was a legalist, and his reforms were revolutionary. He abolished the old aristocratic system entirely. No more hereditary nobles lounging in palaces while peasants starved. Instead, rank and status would be determined solely by merit, specifically military merit and agricultural production. He created a system where every achievement in battle or farming was rewarded with concrete benefits: land, tax exemptions, social status. Kill an enemy soldier, get promoted. Increase your grain yield, get recognition. It was a meritocracy enforced at sword point. But Xiangyang didn't stop there. He reorganized the entire population into groups of 5 and 10 households that were mutually responsible for each other's behavior. If one person committed a crime and the others didn't report it, they all faced punishment. It was collective responsibility taken to an extreme that would make modern surveillance states jealous. He standardized weights, measures, and currency within Qin territory. He built roads and irrigation systems. Most importantly, he created a legal code so harsh and comprehensive that every aspect of life was regulated. There were laws about what you could wear, where you could live, how you could travel, what work you could do. This wasn't freedom as we understand it. This was total state control. And it worked. Within a generation, Qin had transformed from a backward frontier kingdom into the most efficient military machine in ancient China. Its armies were disciplined, its economy was productive, and its government was ruthlessly effective. The other kingdoms still saw Qin as barbaric. They were right in a way, but they failed to understand that in a world torn apart by constant warfare, barbarism backed by superior organization was about to become an overwhelming advantage. Xiangyang himself met a grisly end, torn apart by chariots when political winds shifted. But his reforms had taken root so deeply that they survived their creator. Qin had become something new, a state where ideology, law, and military power were fused into a single, terrifying weapon. And in 259 BCE, into this transformed kingdom, a prince was born who would wield that weapon to conquer the known world. You are born into the royal house of Qin in 259 BCE, but your birth is anything but certain. Your mother is a concubine. Your father is a prince held hostage in a foreign court. And the political situation is so volatile that your very existence is a gamble. Your name is Ying Zheng, and you will grow up to become the first emperor of China. But right now, you're just a child caught in the web of palace intrigue that defines royal life in the Warring States period. Your father, Prince Zichu, is essentially a political prisoner in the kingdom of Zhao. He's there as a guarantee of good behavior. If Qin attacks Zhao, Zichu dies. It's a common practice in this era of shifting alliances and constant warfare. Your mother, Lady Zhao, is either a former dancing girl or the concubine of a wealthy merchant named Lu Buwei, depending on which court rumors you believe. Here's where the story gets interesting. Lu Buwei, despite being a merchant, a relatively low social class, has political ambitions that would make Machiavelli proud. He sees opportunity in the hostage prince and essentially buys your father's way back to power. When you're 9 years old, your grandfather, King Zhaoxiang, dies and your father becomes king of Qin. Suddenly, you're no longer just another royal bastard. You're the crown prince of the most militaristic state in China. But 3 years later, your father dies unexpectedly. At age 13, you become king of Qin, with Lu Buwei as your regent. This isn't like becoming king in a fairy tale. This is like inheriting command of a war machine while still being young enough to need a tutor. The court watches you constantly. Are you weak? Are you controllable? Can you be manipulated? Everyone has an agenda, and you're smart enough to realize that your survival depends on learning to play the game better than anyone else. Lu Buwei tries to control you, surrounding you with his supporters and keeping you focused on ceremonial duties while he runs the real government. But you're not just any teenager. You're a product of the Qin system, hard, pragmatic, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. You study military strategy, administrative theory, and most importantly, you learn to read people. Who can be trusted? Who has their own agenda? Who might try to remove you if you become inconvenient? As you grow older, the tension between you and your region intensifies. Lu Buwei still sees you as the puppet king he helped create, but you're developing your own vision, your own ambitions, and your own understanding of power. The breaking point comes when you discover that Lu Buwei has been having an affair with your mother, and worse, that he's been using this relationship to maintain influence over the royal family. In any other kingdom, this might have been overlooked. But this is Qin, where loyalty to the state is absolute. In 238 BCE, when you come of age at 21, you don't just dismiss Lu Buwei. You systematically dismantle his entire network of supporters. Some are exiled, others are executed. And Lu Buwei himself is forced to drink poison. It's brutal, it's calculated, and it sends a clear message to everyone in the kingdom. The boy king is dead. Long live the emperor. Because by now, you're no longer thinking like a king of Qin. You're thinking like the ruler of all China. And you have a plan that will either unite the civilized world or destroy it in the attempt. By 230 BCE, if you were a spy from one of the eastern kingdoms trying to understand Qin's capabilities, what you'd find would terrify you. This isn't just another warring state. This is a civilization that has transformed itself into a weapon. Walk through a Qin city, and the difference is immediately obvious. Everything is organized, regulated, standardized. The streets are laid out in perfect grids. The buildings follow approved architectural patterns. Even the colors people wear are determined by their social rank. Farmers in dark clothes, artisans in white, officials in various shades according to their position. But it's not just about appearance. The legalist reforms that began with Shangyang have created a society where every person, every resource, every activity serves the state's military ambitions. Take agriculture, for example. In other kingdoms, farming is still largely a family affair with local variations in technique and crop selection. In Qin, agriculture is managed like a military campaign. Officials monitor crop yields district by district. Farmers who exceed quotas are rewarded. Those who fall short face punishment. New agricultural techniques are mandated from the capital and spread systematically across the kingdom. The result? Qin can feed larger armies for longer periods than any of its rivals. Or consider military service. In the Eastern kingdoms, warfare is still largely the domain of aristocrats and their personal retainers. Qin has created the world's first truly professional military. Every male citizen trains with weapons. Military service isn't just an obligation, it's the primary path to social advancement. Qin armies don't fight for glory or personal honor. They fight for concrete rewards. Kill an enemy soldier, and you're promoted one rank. Capture an enemy officer, get additional rewards. Bring back enemy heads as proof and receive land grants. It's warfare reduced to an accounting system, and it's devastatingly effective. But perhaps most importantly, Qin has solved the logistics problem that destroys most military campaigns. While other armies struggle to keep their forces supplied over long distances, Qin has built an infrastructure specifically designed for warfare. Roads connect every major city and military depot. Standardized cartwheels ensure that supply wagons can use the same ruts. Uniform measurements mean that weapons, armor, and ammunition can be mass-produced and distributed anywhere in the kingdom. Centralized administration means that resources can be moved quickly to wherever they're needed most. By 230 BCE, King Zheng commands not just an army, but an entire civilization optimized for conquest. His soldiers are better trained, better equipped, and better supplied than their enemies. His generals are promoted based on results, not bloodline. His economy is designed to support continuous warfare. Most terrifyingly of all, Qin has developed what we might recognize as industrial warfare. Bronze and iron weapons are mass-produced in government workshops using standardized designs. The famous terracotta army, discovered in modern times, shows us just how systematized this had become. Thousands of life-sized clay soldiers, each one unique in facial features, but identical in equipment and posture. It's a stone monument to military standardization. You are dead, but nobody knows it yet. Your body lies in a sealed carriage traveling slowly back to the imperial capital, while your closest advisors, Chief Eunuch Zhao, Chancellor Li Si, and your youngest son Hu Hai face an impossible situation. They're carrying the corpse of the most powerful man in the world, and they have no idea what to do next. This is 210 BCE, and the problem isn't just that the first emperor has died. The problem is that he died without clearly designating a successor, and the entire imperial system he created depends absolutely on having a single unquestioned authority figure. Your eldest son and designated heir, Fusu, is stationed with the northern armies near the Great Wall. He's competent, experienced, and popular with the military. Under normal circumstances, he would naturally assume the throne. But these aren't normal circumstances. Zhao Gao, the chief eunuch, sees an opportunity for personal power. He realizes that if he can control the succession, he can effectively rule the empire from behind the scenes. His preferred candidate is your youngest son, Hu Hai, pliable, inexperienced, and easily manipulated. What happens next is one of history's most consequential conspiracies. During the journey back to the capital, Zhao Gao convinces Li Si and Hu Hai to participate in forging an imperial edict. Using your personal seal, they create a fake decree that orders Fusu to commit suicide and names Hu Hai as the new emperor. The forged edict is sent to the northern frontier, where Fusu, believing it to be authentic, obediently kills himself. General Meng Tian, who commands the northern armies and might have questioned the succession, is also ordered to commit suicide. With the legitimate heir dead and the military leadership eliminated, Hu Hai becomes the second emperor of Qin. But Hu Hai, now known as Emperor Ershi, is completely unprepared for imperial rule. He's young, inexperienced, and has spent his life enjoying palace luxuries rather than learning statecraft. Worse, he's now dependent on Zhao Gao for guidance on virtually every decision. The administrative system you created was designed for efficiency under strong central leadership. When that leadership becomes weak and divided, the very features that made it effective become sources of instability. The first major rebellion erupts in 209 BCE, just 1 year after your death. It begins with Chen Sheng and Wu Guang, two officers transporting peasant conscripts who are delayed by heavy rains. Under Qin law, being late for military duty is punishable by death. Faced with execution for circumstances beyond their control, they decide they have nothing to lose by rebelling. Their uprising spreads like wildfire because it taps into widespread resentment about Qin's oppressive policies. But more importantly, the rebellion reveals that your empire's apparent unity was largely superficial. As soon as central authority weakens, regional identities that you thought you had erased begin to resurface. Former nobles from the conquered kingdoms emerge from hiding to reclaim their ancestral titles. Local generals declare independence and restore the old kingdom boundaries. By 207 BCE, the empire is collapsing faster than your armies can suppress the rebellions. Zhao Gao, realizing that Ershi has become a liability, has him assassinated and briefly attempts to rule directly. But it's too late. The psychological foundation of imperial authority has been shattered. The system you created to ensure eternal stability has lasted exactly 3 years after your death. And as the empire fragments back into competing kingdoms, it becomes clear that building a unified China required more than military conquest and administrative efficiency. By 206 BCE, the empire that once seemed invincible is literally falling apart. The most efficiently administered state in human history is being torn apart by rebellions, court intrigues, and the resurgence of regional identities that were supposedly eliminated forever. The most successful rebel leader is Liu Bang, a former village official who has managed to build a coalition of anti-Qin forces across central China. But he faces competition from Xiang Yu, an aristocrat from the former kingdom of Chu, who commands the largest rebel army. Most symbolically, when rebel forces finally capture the Qin capital of Xianying in 206 BCE, they don't just occupy it, they destroy it. The magnificent palaces that represented unified imperial power are burned to the ground. The libraries containing standardized texts are scattered. The administrative records that documented the empire's efficient governance are deliberately destroyed. Xiangyu, leading the forces that capture the capital, is said to have declared that the fire could be seen from hundreds of miles away as the symbols of Qin authority were reduced to ash. The flames that consumed Xianying in 206 BCE seem to have erased the Qin Dynasty from existence. But while the Qin state had been destroyed, the ideas that had made it possible proved remarkably durable. You are Liu Bang, a former village official who has spent the last 4 years fighting against Qin rule. But now, as you consolidate control over the territories you've conquered, you're discovering something uncomfortable. Many Qin innovations were actually brilliant solutions to real administrative problems. Take standardized currency, for example. When the Qin system collapsed, different regions immediately returned to their old monetary systems. Within months, you're dealing with the same chaos that had plagued China before unification. Reluctantly, you restore a unified currency system, not because you support Qin ideology, but because the alternative is economic chaos. The same pattern emerges with other Qin innovations. Most importantly, you discover that the Chinese population has gotten used to being unified. By 202 BCE, when you finally defeat Xiangyu and reunify China under your own rule as the first emperor of the Han Dynasty, you've learned a critical lesson. You can reject Qin methods, but you can't reject the necessity of unified imperial government. Your solution is to adopt Qin administrative innovations while moderating Qin harshness. The result is a system that is recognizably imperial, unified, centralized, efficiently administered, but without the brutal repression that had made Qin rule unsustainable. For over 2,000 years, the first emperor of China existed primarily as a figure of legend and historical record. Then, in March 1974, everything changed. You are Yang Zhifa, a farmer in Shaanxi province, digging a well during a severe drought. Your shovel hits something hard about 6 feet down, probably a rock, you think, but when you clear away the dirt, you're looking at what appears to be a clay head. You've just discovered what will become known as the Terracotta Army, one of the most significant archaeological finds in human history. Over the following decades, archaeologists uncovered 3 main pits containing over 8,000 terracotta warriors, 130 chariots, 520 horses, and 150 cavalry horses. Each figure is a masterpiece of ancient craftsmanship, but together they represent something unprecedented: an entire army sculpted in clay to protect the emperor's tomb. The level of detail is extraordinary. Infantry soldiers carry different weapons and wear different armor depending on their rank. The standardization that the first emperor imposed on his living empire is reflected in the terracotta army. Today, as you walk through the halls of the Palace Museum in Beijing or stand on a restored section of the Great Wall, you're experiencing the legacy of a man who lived over 2,200 years ago. The first emperor of China failed in his quest for personal immortality, but he achieved something far more lasting. He created the template for Chinese civilization that endures to this day. The standardization systems he implemented, unified writing, currency, weights, and measures, became so deeply embedded in Chinese culture that they survived every subsequent dynasty. The Qin Dynasty lasted only 15 years, but it established the fundamental structure of Chinese government that would endure for over 2,000 years. Every subsequent emperor, regardless of dynasty, would essentially be trying to recreate the Qin achievement while avoiding the Qin mistakes. The first emperor had failed to create an eternal dynasty, but he had succeeded in creating something far more lasting: the idea that China was naturally and properly a unified empire under a single ruler. In death, Ying Zheng achieved the immortality that had eluded him in life, not through magic elixirs or mystical practices, but through the power of ideas, institutions, and innovations that proved too useful and too durable to disappear.